So I was recently reading National Geographic, and I was mildly surprised they did an article on Aretha Franklin. She's not someone I knew much about. I appreciated the article, getting to see her childhood home, learning about her being raised by a minister, learning about the time she did her own version of a classic opera song. But what was most interesting is why that article was in National Geographic in the first place, because, National Geographic, they tend to write songs about animals or remote communities, not pop stars. But the reason they wrote about Aretha Franklin is they've been doing this television series of biopics called Genius. Their first Genius, unsurprisingly, was Einstein. The next season, they went slightly less conventional with Picasso. And the third season, they're doing with Aretha Franklin. Now, Aretha Franklin is always someone I heard about as having a dynamite voice, a huge talent, but I feel like when you throw the word genius on someone, it forces you to listen to their music in a new light. You're not just going, oh, this is kind of catchy, or oh, this is kind of impressive. But suddenly you're not just listening to the music, but you're listening to the mind behind the music. You're hearing each choice is a creative choice and thinking about all the people who wouldn't have made that choice. So that inspired me to listen a bit more closely to Aretha Franklin, and I got this record, I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You, out of my local library. Now, this album happens to start with the most famous Aretha Franklin song of all time, Respect. The actual interesting part of this experience, not to put anyone down, though he's dead, luckily. I don't think I should say luckily. Anyway, the most interesting part of Respect is learning where it comes from. So maybe one of the reasons why Aretha Franklin isn't even more widely thought of as a genius is she didn't write, I don't know if it was the majority, but she wasn't primarily known as a songwriter. She was primarily known as a singer. But with Respect, which was written by Otis Redding, Aretha Franklin might as well be the songwriter, because if you listen to her cover and the Otis Redding original, they sound like very different songs. You just have to be paying attention to the lyrics, which divert a bit to notice they're the same thing. And the Otis Redding one, he has a great voice, obviously, but the horns kind of overwhelm his voice. Whereas with Respect, Aretha Franklin's voice just comes booming out as it does in all her songs. And it's really important that it does that, because Otis Redding's song is a kind of apolitical, I've had a tough day at work, woman, and I want to be respected when I come home from my hard work. Whereas this becomes a feminist anthem, and it includes a reference to your kisses sweeter than honey. You know what else? So's my money. So there's this implication that Aretha Franklin, the woman, has money. Now, what does this mean? The man is still coming home in the song. Is the woman the housewife? It's kind of unclear, but it doesn't really matter. She covered someone else's song, but she essentially rewrote it in the process and made it this feminist anthem. And that's not something you necessarily think about if you're just casually listening to the song on the radio. The next song on the album is Drown in My Own Tears. I don't believe that song was written by Ray Charles, but the Ray Charles version is certainly the famous one. And this is a case where the cover sounds just like the original, but Aretha Franklin's voice is so powerful, it just blows the original out of the water. Now, you could say that maybe her voice is too much, it's too good, and that's why Charles's version is preferable. But that's the interesting contrast you get when a cover and an original song are so similar. The next song on the record is called I Never Loved a Man the Way I Loved You, the title song of the record. I found this song very interesting production-wise. What I noticed is lots of the time you're not actually hearing very many instruments. You'll hear one of them emphasized for the moment, a little bit of trumpets, and they have a kind of sizzling sound to them. But the song is dominated by Aretha Franklin's voice without sounding like it has a sparse sound. And that's partially because the arrangement is so clever, and again, partially just because her voice is so huge. And actually, I noticed a moment where her voice seemed to get so loud that it distorted. Now, that happens a lot in my recordings because I'm an amateur DIY guy who doesn't quite have the time or the know-all to get that recording perfect. I assume the people who are recording Aretha Franklin know how to record a voice properly, so it's almost like this funny way of showing off that she sung so loudly she distorted the recording. The next song on the album is called Soul Serenade, and it contrasts nicely with I Never Loved a Man because it starts off at least with the soft sound. It reminds me of the 50s overly innocent-sounding song Mr. Sandman. It's also an interesting piece of songwriting in that there's not really an obvious verse-chorus structure. And, if you're listening to that in an amateur songwriter, that can sound like a real mess. but here everything just smooths together, flows together so smoothly. It's just a beautiful sound overall that Soul Serenade works out. One of the tricks that makes it work out is they do have this little repeating trumpet motif throughout, so it kind of grounds this otherwise, experimental, all over the place kind of song. The next song on the album is called Don't Let Me Lose This Dream, and this is one of the ones that's co-written by Franklin. So again, even if she's not writing the songs, she's playing a big role in arranging them and creating the musical vision. According to the National Geographic article, she liked to leave sort of tongue-in-cheek comments on her lyric sheets, so the producers knew what kind of sound she was going for. One of the things that stood out to me about this song is that while Aretha Franklin can only go so long without her really booming voice coming out, she comparatively restrains it here and gets a kind of a nice Dolly Parton sound to it. And this also comes out in her lyrics, which show how you can feel vulnerable and show your vulnerability, but still maintain a confident public persona. It's a song about not giving up on your dreams, but it doesn't drip with a longing like some sort of Disney princess ballad for the 90s, and it's not melancholy either. It's just a kind of calmly stated, confident pep talk. Calm, that is, by Franklin standards. Still a very rich pop song. She also co-wrote the next song on the record. It's called Baby, Baby, Baby. I think another strength of this record is its use of backup singers. So sometimes in her belty moments, it almost sounds like Aretha Franklin isn't singing a song anymore. She's going on a rant because she has a point she has to make, and she goes on and on, showing her impressive voice. And I found the effect of the backup singers on this song is to kind of TLDR her message, summarize what you're supposed to hear from it. The next two songs on the album, I didn't have too much to say about it. First, she does Dr. Feel Good, which is a blues song that she, again, co-wrote. What's, I guess, a little interesting about it lyrically is it's just about wanting to spend time with her man, but it sounds like she's talking about some mysterious hot guy, Dr. Feelgood. And then she covers the Sam Cooke classic, Let the Good Times Roll, or it's just called Good Times. The next song on the album is called Do Right Woman. It feels like it's a response to James Brown's It's a Man's World. It's kind of like Respect Part 2, though sung in a softer, less poppy way. It says, look, you've got to respect women or they're gonna fall in love elsewhere. They're gonna seek that love out elsewhere. I mean, the one thing that sort of limits the politics of this album is it's all constrained within the world of relationships. So the way Franklin sings about women's liberation is a woman's only human. You should understand she's not a plaything. She's flesh and blood, just like her man. And if you want a do-right all-day woman, you've got to be a do-right all-night man. So watch out, because she might not be do-right all day if you are not do-right all day. The next song on the record is Save Me, again, a co-write by Franklin. It kind of reminds me of the Bo Diddley style, though it's not directly a Bo Diddley beat. Do-do-do-do-do, do-do. It also has a very root sound compared to the other songs on the album. So, more rhythmic. The instrumentation is less big, but you hardly notice it because Aretha Franklin's voice is always big. I guess the theme of this review is, that Aretha Franklin always just has this impressive, big voice, but I guess there's a sort of theatrical side to her that means she can control it in all these interesting ways that are hard to put into words. So when she finally sings Change Is Gonna Come, which is another Sam Cooke song, I had quite a different reaction than when I heard her sing the Ray Charles song. With the Ray Charles song, I said, okay, she's just doing this and she's outdoing Ray Charles with her bigger, smoother voice. Whereas with this one, Change Is Gonna Come, which is a civil rights anthem, and she starts it with a little prologue alluding to Sam Cooke, who she would have known growing up and who died young. So she pays tribute to him, and there's just this very obvious modesty in her voice. This is, a song about persisting in the face of racism and broader injustices. But despite singing all these strong power ballads, Aretha Franklin isn't necessarily singing it in that way. She's rather taking her place in a tradition that she sees Sam Cooke as one of the leaders in. Anyway, great record overall. I'm curious what other sounds Aretha Franklin has. I mean, supposedly, she had quite a stylistic range. She experimented with opera at one point. I know she went a bit modern poppier in the 80s. I'll have to see. I'll look into what some of the other good records are to listen to. Anyway, check out more of these reviews. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.